Welcome to She's Got Game. I'm Caroline Delaney,
And I'm Pauline Hendricks.
and today we're going to be going through week two. So I think we should start off. I think it was a pretty tame week, with the exception of the great USF Florida game.
Love it.
So obviously, we all saw the score of that game. We all saw what happened. Why don't we start with kind of just the big overview, which is, did this game end the way it did because USF is the new Cinderella story, media darlings, however you want to call it, or are we witnessing Florida just really tanking under Billy Napier?
I think you can go two ways with this. One, USF has now beaten two ranked teams in a row, and they were unranked, and now they are ranked. But it was not ideal for Florida at all, especially at home in the swamp. I am kind of concerned for them this week at LSU. Quite concerned.
I think I think concern is an understatement. I think you're going into LSU this week. You're coming off of that loss. I think it goes one of two ways. I think you either have that team spending the past week really just getting it together and realizing that they don't want this to be their identity, or it goes the complete other way of Brian Kelly really trying to prove himself. They're going into that team and they're just tanking. I think it's really going to be two teams trying to prove themselves. And I think this one's just going to come down to who wants it more, honestly.
I can agree with you on that. I think last week they were playing Louisiana Tech, and it was not as high scoring as I thought it would be, considering how crazy the other games scores were this past week. I think it should have been a little bit higher, but to that point, Florida has not had that hard of an opponent for the past 2 weeks, I would say. They played Long Island, obviously went 55 and 0, and then they had USF, which in an ideal world they were supposed to pull that out, but LSU, two wins obviously under their belt, but last week was against a team that I think they should have performed a little bit better against.
I think doing predictions this early in the season, and I think week two is a lot different from week one, right? Because, week one, you're basing it off of what happened at the end of last season. Obviously, factoring in transfer portal and additions and seniors graduating, etc. I think week two is when it's kind of hard to base it on anything because, yeah, you have the week one performances, but then you look at a lot of the SEC schools that had home openers, for lack of a better term, like Florida versus LIU, right? Like there's a million games like that. So I think unless somebody either comes out absolutely guns blazing swinging, or they come out and it's, what team is this? I think this particular week, it's really hard to predict matchups going forward. I think in another maybe 2 weeks, that's kind of when you can kind of lay down the line of everybody's, I don't want to say found their identities, but has a better idea of how their season's going to go. So I think still at this point, it kind of is anyone's season. I think it's so fresh. And once again, every team is finding their identity for the year. And I think, that really goes to show how the landscape of college football has changed, right? Because looking back 20, 30 years ago, there were the schools that were, you know, set in stone. That's what their reputation is. And now I think with the portal and everything that we've talked about in past episodes with NIL and such, every team can look completely different every year. So I think going forward, it'll be interesting. I think this past weekend was just kind of week one was better on surprising outcomes, entertaining outcomes. I think this weekend, with the exception of the Florida game, was just kind of what everybody thought was going to happen. I think this weekend matchups are going to be a little bit more. I keep using the word identity, but I think like identity defining. I think the Miami game, all of those, I think are going to be, I don't want to say games that actually matter, but I think games that separate teams from just kind of existing and teams that are going to be true playoff contenders. I think it really is going to it picks up in the next few matchups.
I agree. I think this week is definitely, this is quite a general statement. Obviously, there were other matchups in the past 2 weeks that were, you know, equal caliber opponents. But this week, for example, Georgia hasn't really had anybody sort of to test give a benchmark, I think is what you were trying to kind of explain, but find their identity. I have not seen anything that I can have a baseline off of. So them playing Tennessee this week is kind of their first time going up against, and I mean, if we think about it, Georgia's obviously supposed to come out on top, but who knows? But I think that's their first opponent where they'll actually have to play a little bit more than the past 2 weeks against Marshall and against Austin Pay, whatever.
Yeah, no, I think this is when it picks up. I think, this is the good matchup weeks. Even last week, teams that were supposed to win did win, but it wasn't like I was saying back to Alabama, like if you want to look at Clemson too, that shouldn't have gone the way it did. That should have been, I don't, I'm not going to go ahead and say blowout, but it should have been a bigger score differential. So I think now you're kind of going to see, are teams winning because teams deserve to win, or are teams winning because their opponent terrible? You know what I mean? It's just not evenly strength. So I think it's going to start to get interesting. I'm really excited for Vandy, South Carolina this weekend. I think that one with
I agree.
not even necessarily, the playing caliber of the teams. I just think all of the attention around it, I think is going to be very interesting. In the media, the Vanderbilt players have been going into this matchup very, very confidently. I don't want to say South Carolina's been quiet, but I like the term quiet confidence. I think they've kind of taken that route
I can
in
agree.
the media approach. So I'm kind of excited to see, what South Carolina comes out on Saturday night. And is this the turning point for Vanderbilt? I mean, everybody remembers the Coach Spurrier quote, there's no Vanderbilts in the NFL. Diego
He's so silly.
so silly? But is Diego really the real deal? I think this season two for them is kind of going to be not kind of, I think it will be really defining. I think last year kind of heads turned and looked at Vanderbilt a little differently. So I think this is kind of going to be a little experiment,
I
for lack of a
agree.
better term.
I agree. I think it'll kind of seal the deal of was that just, an abnormal season head turning wise, or can they kind of double down on it and solidify the fact that, hey, we're not the butt of the SEC anymore. Like, give us a little bit more credit for what we're doing on the field. I think what is to that point, these matchups have really, I don't know if you can agree, or maybe I'm just paying attention differently than I did the past couple years, but these have been very weird matchups the past 2 weeks. I don't know if it's because of conference realignment. I don't know about what, but like Temple's doing great right now. Troy put up 16 unanswered points against Clemson, who was a previous national champion. I mean, obviously Clemson did win at the end, but that was not expected. USF, not a power conference, and then the American Conference. And look at them over here right now being little Cinderella stories. I think it's really interesting. And even looking at power conference schools, just the points that are being put up, it's really wild to me, really wild.
Here's my thing, right? I love it and I hate it because you have games that are like Alabama on Saturday. What was it, like 71-0 shutouts? That's not fun to watch. But then when you get a matchup and it's you know a Sun Belt Conference school against an SEC school, and all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter and there's five left and you're tied, or the Sun Belt's up. I think those are so 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 fun to watch. And I'm not knocking interconference rivalries. I think that's the greatest thing about college football, right? Like I
100%.
grew up in the Northeast. I love watching a good Penn State Big Ten matchup.
Yup.
Great SEC on SEC. I love it. But I think there's just something about the entertainment. And I think that's something that's so special about college football is the storylines. And I think that if you're at that non-power conference school and you're in your college town on a Saturday and you watch your team somehow pull that magic victory over a Georgia or an Alabama or, you know, Florida, right?
Yes,
That's one of those things you remember for the rest of your life. And I think that's just so special. And I think that that is what makes NCAA football a good product. So I think you can argue both sides for sure because, does it go back to, why are these even happening, which is, trying to make money. But I think it's great. Like, say you're a school, you just got paid, 500 grand to play an
quite
SEC.
handsomely.
Yeah, an SEC or an ACC, and then you win. I think that's awesome. And I think that gives the best storylines. And I think, once again, that's the most special thing about college football is the storylines that come out of it. I mean, that might be media bias for me because that's, the industry we both work in, but
No, I
I
totally agree.
I love it. I think it's killer. And I think it proves how good a football team really is because once again, you can be the hot shot of your conference blowing everybody out and then you get put into the bigger tank and then it's how do you do or you know you're a big team with P4 funding and once again getting killed by a school
Some
with
no name.
like
Yeah,
don't know the name, couldn't tell you what city, you know what I mean? So I just
exactly.
I think it's great. I think it's great and it's not at the same time, but I like it. And I love like the cross conference matchups. I love now that you have SECs playing Big Tens. I think that's awesome. Like I grew up on Big Ten football. Obviously went to college in the SEC. I love that. I think it, is another great one. Like you're talking about proving benchmarks of teams, not that it solves the debate of conference superiority, but you can see, could an SEC school survive the Big Ten? Could a Big Ten survive the SEC? I think it kind of puts a lot of that debate to bed.
I think that's actually a great point because a lot of people have been talking, is the reign of the SEC football over? And I mean, now with all this conference realignment, and we can see playing different schools, different power conferences across the country, we can see kind of how we, stand against other power schools that do have a lot of, notoriety in their program. I was just looking at this, but to the point though of, the media stories of, no name schools coming out. What about like Oklahoma State and Oregon this past weekend? It was 3-69. And I mean, first off, I feel like that should have been a little bit different for Oklahoma State, but at that point, I would be shutting off the TV. I wouldn't be continuing to watch it. Viewership wise, I don't know if that, supports the idea of continuing those types of matchups.
I love when we come to this because I love getting to rip into you for your Florida State take. This once again, for everyone
I love
watching that doesn't know, Pauline will stand
it.
strongly on the hill that Florida State a few years ago should have been in the college football
Absolutely.
playoffs. She will live on that hill, she will die on that hill. What she just said, however, negates the point she's been making, which is what happens when a team goes out of their bubble and all of a sudden starts playing really good teams. The
I
score
love
goes
it.
like this. And what happens, as Pauline just mentioned, when the score goes like this, the remote goes like this.
That's so great. That's so great. I
I'm
mean, I
sorry
guess,
to I'm sorry to interject.
no, I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, Caroline's not wrong. So I definitely can see that. I mean, also,
You love
I might
Florida.
have to, I might have to switch my Florida team now to USF. We don't know.
I
The
don't,
eye
I
roll.
don't know. I don't know if it's going to be. Once again, I
No,
think
I
it's
agree. I
I
agree.
think it's way too early because, it's week 2, right? Like everybody's just starting to get into, I don't want to say real season, but real season. Like kinks are getting worked out. Uh, True matchups are coming. I think, in another 2 weeks, that's when we can really lay out the map of, okay, you're on track to CFP. You have things to work on, but you could be there. And y'all just have to raise money to hit the portal really hard in the winter. But I mean, it looks okay for it. Like I once again, it goes back to the debate of did they win that game because USF was out there playing phenomenal, or did they win that game because Billy Napier is tanking a program right now? Like that once again, I think that answer will come out in another 2, 3 weeks. I think
I
that was
think
the Sunday morning debate.
I think honestly that is the summary of this entire episode is basically as much weird matchups as there are, we can't really tell where anybody is at the moment. So we will see in the coming weeks where truly teams are standing.
Can't agree more. So we'll see y'all next week for week three's recap.
Let's see it. Okay, bye.